What you're looking at isn't fireworks, and it isn't shooting stars. This is Israel's Iron Dome being used to shoot down drones and missiles coming from nearby Arab countries. This Iron Dome is famous for being one of the most technologically advanced missile defense systems in the world, and is just the first reason as to how Israel has become nearly untouchable. It's a multi-billion-dollar defense system, and Israel calls it a lifesaver. 10 different missile defense units make up the Iron Dome, which is strategically located close to the most heavily populated regions of Israel. Within these missile defense systems, 3 main components work together to shoot down these inbound missiles. First, the radar system detects the direction of the incoming missile, along with other features like its speed, weight, and size. This radar system can first detect missiles from 45 miles away or 70 kilometers away. Once the radar detects a threat, the radar system then provides the targeting data to the control center. The control center is like the brains of the missile defense system. This is where the system decides whether it should fire a rocket. The control center can determine where the inbound rocket is likely to land, and whether or not this rocket will land in a crowded urban area or a field in the middle of nowhere. Most of the rockets being fired at Israel are dumb rockets, in that they have no calculated landing spot. They're just fired out of a missile launcher and intended to land somewhere within Israel's borders. If the rocket is on track to land somewhere that won't affect people or buildings, the control center will likely choose not to fire a countermissile. It's not always worth the money to fire a countermissile, considering each one costs $100,000. On the other hand, these dumb missiles that are being fired by militant groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis are closer to just $800, making them less than 1% of the cost of Israel's high-tech missiles. Then if we move over to the third and final piece of the missile defense system, that's where we have the missile battery, which is the actual launcher for these missiles. These missile defense systems that make up the Iron Dome are also all on wheels, so they can be transported anywhere throughout the country. Each one of these missile defense systems can track 1,000 missiles at a time and shoot down 2,200 rockets in 20 minutes. This has led to the Iron Dome having a reported 90% success rate and stopping inbound missiles from other nearby Arab countries. What you may be surprised to hear, though, is that this technology is still relatively new. Well, a key part of Israel's defense should be ready in November. It's called the Iron Dome. It's a shield designed to shoot down mortar bombs and short-range rockets. The Iron Dome was first used against real inbound missiles in 2011, when Hamas and the Gaza Strip attempted to fire rockets into southern regions of Israel. The Iron Dome shot down all these inbound rockets coming from Hamas, marking this as a significant turning point. In Israel's defense capabilities before the implementation of the Iron Dome, Israel relied on much larger Patriot missile batteries, which are designed to shoot down missiles coming from much further away. The smaller missiles that Hamas routinely fires into Israel are not high-tech at all and don't travel very far. This led to the Patriot missiles not being very effective against short-range attacks. Israel would also conduct airstrikes where they would target missile-launched sites in Gaza and surrounding Arab countries. Although this operation was intended to destroy the weapons of Israel's enemies, the rockets Israel was firing often led to additional civilian casualties, something that the enemies of Israel have been extremely critical of. Iron Dome was implemented. Israel was undergoing many casualties from these inbound rockets. The last major instance of this was during the 2006 Lebanon War, which lasted from July 12 to August 14, 2006. During this war that lasted about a month, Hezbollah, a militant group that controls much of Lebanon, fired thousands of rockets into northern Israel. Israel at the time didn't have the defense capabilities to shoot down all these rockets. So many of these rockets ended up exploding in the Israeli cities of Haya, Nahara, Kirat, and Shona. This led to the death of 165 Israelis and the destruction of important infrastructure. Israel ended up firing back with rockets of their own and even sent some of their troops into southern Lebanon. Hezbollah was no match for Israel and never really has been, where over 1,000 casualties took place on the Lebanon side, promptly ending a quick end to the war. This was just another instance of Israel being provoked by a nearby militant group and then responding with its military in a much stronger and more destructive way. Israel has also invested so much in their military throughout the years, mainly because they have been engaged in callous wars. Ever since the formation of the country, Israel officially declared itself as an independent Jewish state on May 14, 1948. And then the literal next day, on May 15, 1948, an all-out war broke out in this region known as the Arab-Israeli War. This declaration that Israel signed was part of a partition plan that the United Nations proposed. where there would be two independent states, one for Palestine and one for Israel. The nearby Arab nations rejected this partition plan and launched military operations against the newly declared state of Israel. The Arab nations fighting against Israel in this war included Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and the newly displaced Palestinians. Now, at first glance, this would seem like it would be a complete blowout with the Arab nations becoming victorious. You have 5 already established countries with many more people and land fighting against a country that is technically a day old and significantly smaller in population. Israel ended up defeating the odds and essentially won this war by signing different peace treaties with the Arab countries that they were fighting. Israel has been no stranger to war with these nearby countries ever since these peace treaties were signed. However, there was the Sinai War in 1956, the Six-Day War in 1967, the Yom Kippur War of 1973, the First Lebanon War of 1982, the Second Lebanon War in 2006, and then up to the fighting today where Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis are coming after Israel. But with all these constant attacks from the Arab countries, even since the formation of the country, you're probably wondering, how does Israel keep winning these wars? Well, that brings us to our next reason: why Israel has been nearly untouchable. That doesn't necessarily have to do so much with Israel, and more to do with the leaders of these Arab countries, complete incompetence, and failed leadership. How do you justify killing people as they sleep, families? How do you justify, I want to stop this? I want to stop the 3 main militant groups in these Arab countries: Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah, which controls much of Lebanon, and then the Houthis, which controls much of Yemen. These 3 groups are all under Iran's leadership. Typically, Iran has these groups go after their targets, so that it never seems like Iran is directly engaging in wars. Iran is one of the only legitimate governments in this region where these militant groups control much of the other land. Hezbollah was formed in Lebanon in the 1980s as a resistance movement against Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, which started as a resistance group and ended up turning into much more of a terrorist group that controls much of the country today. Syria has been in a civil war for the past 12 years, and before that, they were led by one of the evilest dictators of all time, Bashar al-Assad. Then there's Iraq, which was led by Saddam Hussein for almost 25 years, a dictator that carried out chemical attacks against his population, which led to the death of hundreds of thousands in Iraq. Jordan has had to deal with widespread poverty across the country for many reasons, one of them being the fact that Jordan hosts the second highest number of refugees per capita out of any country in the world. Just for reference, Jordan has a population of 11 million, where there are 1.3 million refugees, nearly 10% of the country's population. And then there's Egypt, which is probably the most stable of Israel's neighbors, but still faces significant challenges from water scarcity to overpopulation, with high unemployment, and has even had a deal with several military coups that attempted to overthrow the government. With these different Arab countries lacking real leadership and proving to be some of the most corrupt places to live in the world, it becomes clear that Israel hasn't had to fend off the toughest opponents. The country that would be an extremely tough opponent for Israel is Iran. Israel and Iran have never directly fought before, up until April 13, 2024. For the first time, Iran directly fired up a barrage of artillery at Israel, which included 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and more than 120 ballistic missiles, all designed to strike Israel. Israel closed airspace to all flights as it braced for an Iranian attack. The Iron Dome went into full force and shot down this artillery coming for. Israel has a 99% success rate. Out of the 300 different objects fired at Israel, only 3 landed in the country. There ended up being 0 casualties and 0 buildings destroyed, showing just how powerful this Iron Dome is, despite this massive success for Israel. Many experts still argue that if Israel and Iran were to directly engage into a full-scale war, it would be close, but Iran would likely end victorious. After all, Iran has 88 million people, while Israel has less than 10 million. Iran is also 74 times bigger than Israel in land size. This would make it harder for Israel's smaller military size to take control of such a large area of land. Iran is also a major exporter of oil and natural resources, which allows them to profit off global superpowers like China and Russia. Iran is known to have an oil-for-goods swap with Russia, where Iran sends Russia oil in exchange for Russia's military technology. This war would be a whole different story, though, if Israel had additional help from its allies like the United States and Great Britain. That brings us to a third reason why Israel has become untouchable, which boils down to the power of Israel's allies. Although Israel is not part of the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO, they are still closely aligned with many of these countries. The United States and Great Britain are very close with Israel. For the same reason as why these countries originally joined NATO, one of the main reasons for the formation of NATO was to deter the Soviet Union from expanding any further into Europe and the Middle East after World War II. The United States saw that the Soviet Union was becoming closely aligned with these Arab countries in the Middle East that were constantly going after Israel. If the Soviet Union were to give these Arab countries assistance and provide them with more competent leadership and stronger weapons, this probably would have been too much for Israel to handle. The Arabs would have ended up winning these wars, and then this land would have ultimately turned over to the Soviets. The United States didn't want this to happen, which led to President Harry Truman of the United States developing a close relationship with the Israeli leadership in 1948. The following presidents all maintained this close partnership with Israel up until the present day, when the United States is actively supplying Israel with weapons and finances. Historically, Israel has been the largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid out of any country across the globe. From 1948 to 2023, the United States has given Israel $216 billion in military aid and $81 billion in economic aid, although a total of $297 billion is a lot of money. This averages just under $4 billion a year in aid. On the other hand, the United States in the past 2 years alone has given Ukraine over $134 billion in their fight with Russia. Explaining this statistic isn't meant to be a hit piece on the U.S. government sending money to Ukraine, but more to show that the whole idea that the West has been propping up Israel all these years isn't true. It's easy to say that the only reason Israel has been successful is because of their big brother, the United States. But the vast majority of Israel's military spending comes from their government. Israel on average spends $27.5 billion a year on their military, where just $2.8 billion of this comes from the United States. This goes to show that Israel has many profitable industries of its own, which brings us to our fourth reason as to why Israel has become untouchable: Israel's extremely profitable economy. Israel is known as a startup nation, where they have the second most startup businesses out of any country across the globe behind the United States. This is incredibly impressive given their population is under 10 million people. Israel has produced numerous successful technology companies, most of which are in areas such as cyber, security software development, biotech, and medical devices. This entrepreneurial spirit in Israel has led the country to have the third highest number of NASDAQ-listed businesses after the United States and China. Another sector of Israel's economy that has led to its success is the diamond cutting industry. Israel is one of the world's major diamond trading centers and is famous for their expertise in diamond cutting and polishing. This may seem like a very niche industry, but in the year 2020 alone, Israel exported $7.5 billion worth of diamonds. Another extremely important export of Israel is its military technology, and more specifically, its Iron Dome technology. Several countries have seen how successful it is. This Iron Dome technology has been, and I've inquired about purchasing this technology from Israel. Some of these countries include Cyprus, Turkey, Germany, Ukraine, and even the United States. The United States is the only country to have publicly purchased this technology, where they have positioned 2 of these Iron Dome defense units close to their military bases in the Middle East. The United States ended up selling back this technology to Israel following the October 7, 2023 attacks from Hamas. This increases Israel's Iron Dome capabilities to 12 different units, as opposed to the original 10 mentioned at the beginning of this video. Although this equipment is some of the best in the world operating, it does come at a pretty high cost. As mentioned before, each missile that Israel fires is worth $100,000, while the inbound missiles that Houthi are firing are only around $800. This brings up an important counter-argument regarding how reliable this Iron Dome will always be. Additionally, on October 7, 2023, Hamas was able to fire 5,000 rockets in just 20 minutes. The Iron Dome is only capable of stopping 2,200 rockets every 20 minutes. This led to many rockets making it through the Iron Dome and raining in on the Israeli population. Israel didn't reveal how many rockets made it into the populated regions of Israel, but video evidence shows that many rockets unfortunately destroyed buildings and even ended many lives, while Hamas is only capable of doing so much to Israel. If Iran gets fully involved, this could turn into a much bigger story. This region is what could ignite a larger regional war and even a World War III that we could have already seen the early stages of For a more in-depth analysis as to what World War III would look like, check out this video right here.